Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett mocked Karoline Leavitt's college degree on a live panel. But then, a 20-year-old student named Emily stood up, and what she said silenced the room and went viral across the nation. This moment flipped everything. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. It was the kind of moment you could feel before it even fully landed. The air tightened. Heads turned. Phones rose just a little higher. Eyes darted from face to face. Texas Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, known for her razor-sharp wit and unapologetic style, leaned back in her chair, cool, composed, calculating. Then came the smirk. Not a smile, not a grin. A smirk. The kind that says, "I'm about to say something you'll never forget." And she did. Across from her, sitting with straight posture and a carefully measured expression, was Karoline Leavitt. At just 26 years old, Leavitt had already made headlines as a fiery conservative voice, a former Trump White House assistant, and now a rising star among young Republicans. Her polished look, firm tone, and tightly prepared talking points had made her a standout on the panel, until now. The two women were among the headline speakers at a high-profile Gen Z political engagement forum, hosted at one of the top universities in the country. The event was meant to highlight civil discourse and generational leadership. Professors, journalists, influencers, and hundreds of college students packed the auditorium. Live streams were rolling. TikToks were already being clipped in real time. Up to this point, the panel had been lively but respectful. Crockett and Leavitt disagreed, often sharply, but had kept things above the belt. That was, until the topic shifted to political credibility. Karoline had just made a pointed remark about career politicians losing touch with the average American. The crowd was split, some nodding, others skeptical. That's when Crockett struck. In a tone dripping with sarcasm and unmistakable condescension, she fired back. "Well, I guess if we're taking advice from someone with a communications degree, from St. Anselm College, we've officially lowered the bar." Silence. Then, scattered gasps. A few awkward chuckles. Some clapped, unsure if they should. Others looked around, gauging reactions. The tension was so thick you could feel it. Pressing down on your chest, Crockett didn't blink. She adjusted her mic and casually glanced at her notes, like it was just another day at the office. But it wasn't. This wasn't a policy disagreement. This wasn't a debate over tax rates or border laws. This was personal. The implication was clear. Karoline's background, her school, her degree, made her less than. Not qualified, not respectable, not worth listening to. Karoline tried to play it cool. She gave a tight smile, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and leaned slightly forward in her seat. She didn't speak right away, but her eyes said everything. That one hurt. You could almost hear what she was thinking. Do I fire back? Do I keep it classy? What do I say when someone just tried to invalidate my entire journey with a single sentence? She reached for her water bottle but didn't take a sip. Just a pause, to gather herself. Behind her, a student in the second row whispered, "Wait, did she just insult her college?" Another replied, "Yeah, she really went there." And then something happened that no one expected. From the middle of the audience, a young woman slowly stood up. No microphone, no invitation, just courage. She looked to be in her early 20s, maybe a sophomore or junior. Dark-rimmed glasses, denim jacket, laptop in hand. She cleared her throat and spoke loudly enough for the panel to hear. "I'm sorry, but that's not okay." Heads turned. All eyes shifted to her. The moderators looked surprised, but didn't interrupt. "I go to a school just like St. Anselm. It's small. It's not Ivy League. But it's affordable. It's where I could actually get in. And I've worked my tail off to be here." Her voice didn't tremble. She wasn't yelling, but she was clearly speaking from the gut. Are we really saying that someone's degree decides whether they get to speak on politics? Whether they deserve respect? She gestured toward Leavitt. You might not agree with her views. I don't on a lot of things. But mocking where she went to college? That's just mean. And, honestly, kind of elitist. The room went still. Again. But this time, it was a silence of reflection. Jasmine Crockett shifted in her seat. Her expression softened, ever so slightly. Even she seemed taken aback by the honesty. Leavitt's eyes flicked to the student, and for the first time in several minutes, her face relaxed. The moderators quickly regained control, thanking the student and promising a response from the panel. But by that point, the energy had shifted. What started as a sharp exchange had transformed into a deeper moment, one about identity, opportunity, and how we measure worth in modern America. And the story wasn't even close to being over. It wasn't loud. It wasn't planned. But it cut through the tension like a knife. A single student, maybe 20 years old, slowly stood up from her seat in the middle row. No microphone, no spotlight, just sheer courage. The room turned. Hundreds of eyes shifted toward her in near-synchronized motion. Even the moderator looked momentarily startled, unsure whether to stop her or let her speak. She didn't wait for permission. I'm sorry, but that's not okay. Those 7 words echoed louder than anything said before them. She stood tall, nervous, maybe, but unmoved. In a navy blue hoodie, worn sneakers, and a laptop bag slung over her shoulder, she didn't look like someone seeking attention. She looked like someone fed up. My name is Emily, she said, steadying her voice. I'm a junior here, political science major. My parents didn't go to college. In fact, my dad still works double shifts just so I could be here today. Now, it was really quiet. No phones buzzed. No one whispered. The whole auditorium had fallen into respectful silence. I worked for scholarships. I chose a small regional college at first, just like Karoline, because it was what my family could afford. It gave me the education I needed, and a shot at my dreams. Her voice cracked slightly. Not from nerves, but emotion. Are we seriously saying that your voice only matters if you come from an Ivy League school? She paused for a breath. Everyone leaned in, hanging on her words. Because if that's the message we're sending, then I guess students like me don't count. I guess our effort, our struggle, and our potential are less valid just because we didn't go to a top-ranked campus. There was nothing rehearsed in her words, no talking points, no political spin, just raw, honest frustration wrapped in courage. You don't need Harvard to be heard. You don't need Yale to make a difference. What you need is passion, discipline, and grit. And yeah, you need a degree, but where it comes from doesn't define your intelligence. That last word hit like thunder. Jasmine Crockett, seated at the front, blinked, visibly caught off guard. For the first time since the exchange began, she didn't have a comeback ready. Her body language shifted. The confident smirk had faded. Even Karoline Leavitt, who had been preparing her response, stopped mid-motion. She stared at Emily with wide eyes, half grateful, half amazed. Because this wasn't just a defense of Karoline, it was a challenge to the entire room. Emily continued, her voice firmer now. My best friend's mom is a janitor. She graduated from a local community college and now works in city government. My mentor went to a historically black college, and she's now leading policy at the state level. Do their voices matter less? Are we really going to sit here and pretend that someone's diploma is the only thing that makes them worth listening to? A few students clapped, then more joined in. Soon, a wave of respectful applause began to ripple across the auditorium, not out of politeness, but agreement. Emily glanced toward Karoline and gave a small, encouraging nod. Then she sat down, quietly, without waiting for a response. It wasn't a mic drop. There was no dramatic walk-off. It was simply one student using her voice when it mattered most, and letting that be enough. But in that moment, the whole tone of the panel changed. Up on stage, Karoline Leavitt was visibly moved. She placed her hand over her heart, then leaned into the mic. "Emily," she said, "thank you. I wish I had someone like you standing beside me when I first entered politics." She smiled. Not the forced kind, but the real kind. The kind that says, "I see you, and I'm grateful. You just said what so many young people across this country need to hear. And you're absolutely right." Then, she turned back to the crowd. "I'm not ashamed of my degree. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of where I come from. I didn't come from money or legacy connections. I came from hard work. I worked 3 jobs in college. I skipped parties to study. I sacrificed, and I'm here because I earned it." Applause again, louder this time. You don't have to agree with me politically, but no one, and I mean no one, should ever feel small because of where they studied. That's not what leadership is. That's not what progress is. Crockett adjusted her mic. She opened her mouth to speak, then paused. For once, she looked reflective, maybe even regretful. The moderator stepped in, steering the discussion forward. But the mood had shifted. This was no longer just a sparring match between politicians. It had become something deeper, a reminder that titles and degrees don't define a person's value. A reminder delivered not by a lawmaker, not by a pundit, but by a student with a voice that refused to be quiet. And in doing so, Emily didn't just defend Karoline Leavitt. She defended every student scraping by, every underdog working twice as hard for half the recognition, every future leader coming from unexpected places. In that moment, Emily stood taller than anyone else in the room, and no one, not even a congresswoman, could argue with that. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't lash out. There was no smugness, no sarcasm. Instead, Karoline Leavitt leaned forward into the microphone, her voice calm but resolute. The fire was still there, but it had been tempered into something more powerful. Conviction. "I don't apologize for where I went to school," she began, eyes scanning the crowd. "I'm proud of it." There was a shift in the air again, this time not from tension, but from focus. The audience, still charged from Emily's impromptu stand, leaned in, eager to hear what would come next. I didn't come from privilege either. I wasn't born with a political legacy or a family name that opened doors. I had to earn every step. I worked 3 jobs during college. I wrote speeches by day, waited tables by night, and squeezed in classwork whenever I could. Heads nodded. Some students exchanged glances of surprise. This wasn't the typical talking points. It felt real. And I didn't need a fancy name on my diploma to serve in the White House. Silence. Not stunned silence like before. Respectful silence. Karoline let the words sit in the air for a moment. Not for drama, but to make sure they were heard. "Let's stop pretending that success only comes with a brand name," she continued. "Let's stop pushing the lie that if your degree doesn't come stamped with an Ivy League seal, it somehow counts less." A few claps broke out, then more. This time it wasn't awkward. It wasn't uncertain. It was genuine. Even students, who didn't share her political views, who maybe never would, were nodding. Because this wasn't about partisanship anymore. It was about something deeper, the value of struggle, the dignity of the climb. I got where I am because I worked, I sacrificed, and I believed in my voice, even when people told me I was too young, too inexperienced, too ordinary. There it was, that word, ordinary. Because in that moment, Karoline was speaking not just for herself, but for millions of young Americans who feel left out of the elite conversations, who feel talked down to because they don't come from the right zip code, or wear the right blazer, or attend the right campus. Mocking someone's education isn't a policy argument, Karoline said. It's just elitism, plain and simple. She turned slightly toward Jasmine Crockett, not to attack, but to draw a line. You can disagree with everything I believe in. You can challenge my policies. You can critique my voting record, my opinions, my alliances. That's politics. That's fair. But reducing me to where I studied? That's not debate. That's dismissal. There was no applause line there, but somehow it hit even harder. If we want the next generation to rise, we should uplift ambition, not belittle its roots. Because those roots, humble, small-town, hard-working, are what this country is built on. Now the clapping returned. Stronger, louder. You could hear students saying yes under their breath, clapping with both hands and nodding vigorously. Even some of Jasmine Crockett's supporters couldn't help but give Karoline her due. It was a moment, and it went viral. Clips of Karoline's speech were uploaded within minutes. On TikTok, one 90-second segment, captioned, "Karoline Leavitt shuts down elitism with class," hit 1.2 million views overnight. Instagram Reels carried Emily's emotional defense alongside Karoline's poised response. Twitter, now X, exploded with contrasting headlines. Karoline Leavitt shows grace under fire. A student silenced the room and reminded us all what education is about. Jasmine Crockett's comment sparks national debate on class and college. Even political commentators, left and right, began weighing in. Some criticized Crockett's jab, others defended it as sarcasm taken out of context. But nearly everyone agreed. Something real had happened on that stage, something bigger than politics. Back in the auditorium, the panel moved forward. The moderator steered the conversation back to civic engagement. Other panelists shared their thoughts, cautiously stepping into the now rebalanced room. But Karoline's moment lingered. So did Emily's. After the event, students surrounded both of them. Some came to thank Emily for speaking truth to power. Others told Karoline that, while they didn't agree with her on much, her response earned their respect. One student, wearing a faded community college hoodie, approached Karoline with tears in her eyes. "You just made me proud of where I come from," she said. Karoline smiled and hugged her. That night, the story didn't end, it spread. It sparked conversations on campuses around the country. Professors discussed it in lectures. Students posted their own college pride stories online. Hashtags like "degree doesn't define you" and "voices" from every campus trended across social media. And Jasmine Crockett? Even she issued a statement later that week, saying, "Sometimes the sharpest moments lead to the most important conversations. I appreciate the passion that came from that audience, and I respect anyone working hard to make their voice heard." Whether sincere or strategic, it was a nod to the impact of the exchange. Because in a room filled with politics, microphones, and power suits, it wasn't a lawmaker who reshaped the moment. It was a student named Emily and a young leader named Karoline, who chose grace over retaliation. Together, they reminded everyone watching, no matter where you come from, your voice matters. Always. Just hours after the event, as clips of the panel began dominating social media, Crockett took to Twitter, now X, in an attempt to control the narrative. She posted, "Wasn't attacking anyone personally, just pointing out the importance of being informed." But it didn't land the way she hoped. The internet doesn't wait, and it certainly doesn't forget. Her attempt at clarification was instantly met with a mix of backlash and disbelief. One user replied bluntly, "You literally mocked someone's college. That's personal." Another posted a side-by-side screenshot of Crockett's original quote and her tweet, writing, "Gaslight mode activated." The momentum had already shifted, and the damage was done. Within hours, clips of the exchange between Jasmine Crockett and Karoline Leavitt racked up millions of views across platforms. On TikTok, the confrontation was edited into dramatic cinematic reels. On Instagram, Emily's powerful stand was set to inspirational music. On YouTube, political channels posted full breakdowns, and reaction videos poured in. But it wasn't just viral, it was transformative. Two hashtags led the charge. Respect all degrees. Student Emily. They trended nationwide. Students from community, colleges, HBCUs, technical schools, and state universities began posting videos, each with the same message. I may not go to an Ivy League school, but I'm proud of where I study. One student filmed a video from a library with textbooks stacked beside her. She looked straight into the camera and said, "I'm working 2 jobs and pulling 4.0s. My degree matters. I matter." Another stitched Emily's speech with her own commentary. When she said, "You don't need Harvard to be heard," I felt that. Even students from elite universities joined in, not to argue, but to show solidarity. A Harvard student posted, "Privilege doesn't equal merit. Everyone's path is valid. We rise together." Meanwhile, some of Crockett's own supporters began distancing themselves from her comments. One popular left-leaning commentator tweeted, "We can challenge ideas without insulting people's backgrounds. That's what real leaders do." It quickly went viral, shared by educators, politicians, and influencers alike. A respected journalist posted, "We talk about equity and inclusion, but then mock someone's school? Can't have it both ways." And Karoline Leavitt? She took a different approach. Instead of tweeting a takedown or issuing a victory lap, she posted a single photo, her and Emily, smiling together after the event. The caption? She reminded us that courage isn't taught, it's earned. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't partisan, but it was powerful. The post exploded, earning tens of thousands of likes within hours. The comments were flooded with support, not just for Karoline, but for Emily. She's a hero. That student spoke for all of us. I want to be as brave as her someday. Mainstream media couldn't ignore it. Cable news hosts discussed it that night. Some framed it as a generational shift in how young Americans view education and opportunity. Others debated whether Crockett's comments reflected a deeper problem in political discourse. Talk shows jumped in too. On The View, one host said, "You can't preach equality and then throw shade at someone's college. It doesn't work like that." Another added, "Emily is the kind of young person this country needs. Authentic, brave, unshaken." Colleges across the country began responding too. One university president released a statement. "Every student's journey is unique, and every degree earned with grit and perseverance is a triumph. We stand with those whose voices are too often overlooked." Professors shared Emily's speech in class. High school teachers played the clip during discussions on leadership and resilience. College newspapers ran editorials with headlines like, "Why? We're all Emily. A degree is more than a brand name. The real power of speaking up." It wasn't just a trending moment. It became a movement. Students started posting where they went to school, why they chose it, and what it meant to them. It was like the internet flipped the narrative overnight, from elitism to empowerment. One video montage went especially viral, a compilation of students holding up signs that read, "Proud to be first gen, community college, full heart. No, Ivy still rising. Education is education." Even months later, people were still referencing the panel. It became one of those cultural flashpoints, a reminder that the words we use, especially in politics, matter more than ever. As for Emily, she gained tens of thousands of followers overnight. News outlets interviewed her. Podcast hosts reached out. She turned down most media appearances saying, "I wasn't trying to be famous. I just said what I felt was right." And maybe that's why her words resonated so deeply, because they were real. In the end, Jasmine Crockett's comment sparked more than a controversy. It sparked a national conversation about dignity, about inclusion, about the value of every student's path, regardless of how it's paved. It was never really about Jasmine Crockett versus Karoline Leavitt. Sure, it started with a sharp jab, a remark that cut deeper than maybe even Crockett intended. A quip aimed not just at a person, but at a pedigree, a college, a background. But the moment that changed everything, the one that everyone remembers, didn't come from a politician. It didn't come from a viral tweet or a perfect clapback. It came from a student. A young woman named Emily, who had no microphone, no title, and no script, just a voice, and the courage to use it. She stood up, not to go viral, not to score points, but because something inside her said, "That's not right." And that instinct, that sense of fairness, it cut through the noise louder than any soundbite ever could. Are we seriously saying that your education only matters if it came from an Ivy League school? She asked. Her words, though soft, echoed across the country. Because this wasn't just about Leavitt's degree. It was about every student who's ever felt invisible in a room filled with expensive diplomas. It was about every kid who couldn't afford the application fees for elite colleges but still stayed up all night studying. It was about every parent who works 2 jobs just to help their child get any education at all. Emily didn't just speak for herself. She spoke for the millions who know what it feels like to be overlooked, not for lack of effort, but because of where their journey started. And when Karoline Leavitt responded, she didn't come back swinging. She didn't gloat. She chose humility. "I'm proud of where I went to school," she said. "I didn't need a fancy name on my degree to serve. In the White House." Those words, they hit home. Because in that moment, politics took a back seat. What took the wheel was dignity, authenticity. The truth that what matters most isn't the school name on your resume, it's the work behind it. The conversation that followed reached far beyond the panel stage. On TikTok, students held up signs, showing off their college pride. First gen, State U, full heart, working class and winning. Respect all degrees wasn't just a hashtag, it became a statement, and the media noticed. Talk shows praised Emily's bravery. Educators played the clip in classrooms. Parents shared it with their kids. Suddenly, St. Anselm College, previously a name only a few had heard, was trending on Twitter, and so were community colleges, trade schools, HBCUs. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't about political jabs. It was about real people doing real work, without needing an Ivy League seal of approval to feel seen. Even Crockett's supporters had to pause. Some still defended her, but many said what others were thinking. We can debate without tearing down someone's background. Because here's the truth. Prestige doesn't always equal value. There are brilliant minds in small-town campuses, community college classrooms, and night schools. There are future leaders waiting tables while acing midterms. There are entrepreneurs working in garages with degrees no one's ever heard of, and they matter. Their voices matter. Their journeys matter. And when we dismiss someone because of where they studied, we risk silencing the very stories that inspire change. That's why Emily's moment meant so much. She wasn't just defending a degree. She was defending dreams. She reminded us that intelligence isn't about zip codes or campus buildings. It's about drive. It's about resilience. It's about believing in yourself when no one else does. And maybe, just maybe, that's what this generation is really hungry for. Not polished sound bites. Not snobbery dressed up as sophistication. Not leaders who weaponize their resumes like shields, but real conviction. Honest voices. People who've been through something and aren't afraid to stand up for others who are still climbing. Because the truth is, you don't need a Harvard education to make a difference. You need heart, and Emily proved that in one quiet, courageous moment. She stood up for someone she didn't know. She spoke up when the room went silent. She turned an insult into a rallying cry. And in that moment, she wasn't just a student, she was the most powerful person in the room.